Hello, welcome Brazil. My name is Benjamin Aronov. I am joining you from Tel Aviv. I am very honored to be called to speak at this conference. And we're going to be talking about building a Facebook bot with Node and Express today using the Vonage Node SDK and a food delivery that's near and dear to my heart, a food delivery app called Wolt. So let's get started. So who is Benjamin Aronov? Like I said, I live in Tel Aviv in Israel. We have some pretty great beaches. I hear they compare almost to the famous beaches of Brazil. I moved here and I attended a coding bootcamp. Then I worked there for about a year and a half, working as a teacher, community manager, and just all around helping get that bootcamp off the ground. And that's I had learned to code a little bit before. I had a few different adventures trying to code, but it never really clicked. And then I moved here and did like a full, intense 24-hour-a-day boot camp in Ruby on Rails. So no matter where you are in your coding journey, definitely like the biggest thing is just putting in the time and effort. So after working at the coding bootcamp for about a year and a half, I then got my first quote-unquote real tech job working in Vonage, where I work now, along with one of the organizers, Amanda. She's awesome. She's the best. I do have a bit of an affinity for Brazil and Brazilian culture. I worked in a Brazilian restaurant called Coco Loco back in my hometown in the U.S. in St. Louis, serving churrasco. So I remember at 18, the first time I took one of those big knives and was serving people, a few inches from their face, big slabs of meat. And that was super fun. And I hope one day, I was planning in this period of COVID to come to Brazil. It hasn't worked out so far, but I'm really hoping. And just before moving here, I was actually opening a business of my own in the food industry. I had started a bagel restaurant. It was starting to be really, really popular and fun. Problem was, at 25 years old, I realized that the more successful the bagel business became, the earlier in the morning I was having to wake up. And as a good developer, I have no problem staying up late, but waking up early was becoming more and more difficult. So I decided, let me drop everything, leave my bagels behind, and let me move to Tel Aviv and try and get into this high-tech life. So that kind of brings me to two main passions, and I have a feeling most of you are very similar. Passion for food and a passion for sitting for long hours in front of the computer, unable, time, energy, whatever, to actually cook. So I spend a lot of time ordering food. So this brings us to our mission today in this session. What we're going to be doing is reliving those moments of when you go on your favorite food delivery app. Here in Tel Aviv, it's Wolt. In Brazil, it might be Uber Eats or Deliveroo or whatever it is. But it's always the worst is when you're going onto your food delivery app and you want to get your favorite restaurant, and then you get that screen that says, this restaurant is offline right now. And then you have to start scrolling through other restaurants that you don't really want, and in the meantime, maybe your favorite restaurant went back online and you didn't even know about it, or you have to keep going back and checking to see when they finally get back online. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a little Facebook bot using the Vonage API that will basically, we're going to tell it, hey, I want you to tell me, is this restaurant online? Is it delivering? And if it's not delivering, tell me as soon as it opens back up. So we're going to use the Vonage Node SDK. We're going to use the Wolt API. Okay, so what is our mission today, whether we choose to accept it or not? We are going to build a solution for this situation where you go on your favorite food app and it says that the restaurant is unavailable, and you don't want to have to check every couple of minutes to see, can I get burgers from my favorite burger place? We live in 2021. We should have a smarter solution. So we're going to build a little Facebook bot which will check for us and let us know as soon as the restaurant is back online. And I want to give credit to a friend of mine, Ido Cohen. He actually built the same bot, but for Telegram. And so I saw this and it inspired me. I said, well, that's very nice, but I don't use Telegram. I use Facebook Messenger. I use WhatsApp. And using the Vonage Node SDK, we can build exactly that bot for Facebook and then reuse the same code for WhatsApp. So just to give a little preview of what we want to build. And so here the video will go. And okay, so I said we're going to use the Vonage Node SDK. And Vonage gives us the power to do this mission impossible, right? But what is Vonage? Play my favorite little Vonage clip.
API, Alligator Party Island, All Pineapple Igloo, Animated Penguin Ice Cream. Good APIs, but Vonage's APIs help developers build communications into their apps, which is cooler than those, except for maybe the Igloo.
So yeah, as you can see, Vonage is an API company with a very interesting marketing team. So let's check out what developers really care about. The dev portal. So you'll find something like this. And if we look, we have some nice documentation. And you can find all of our different APIs. So the API we're going to be working with today is the Messages API. So very briefly, what this API does is it allows us to communicate with our users over all these different channels. So we have WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, Viber, SMS, MMS. So we'll be able to take this same logic that we use today, and if we wanted to, we could use all these different channels. So that's pretty exciting. So I like to start with a little pseudocode. This goes back to my bootcamp days. So an overview of what we're going to be doing, we'll set up an Express server. Then we're going to connect to the Messages API. We have a really nice sandbox, which lets you get testing with the API really fast, sending messages. Then we will call the Wolt API and get the restaurant information. We're going to check if the restaurant is online. Then we'll build some logic to handle what message we want to send to the user, and then we'll keep looping until the restaurant is back online. Okay, so this looks kind of like a serial killer note, but bear with me. I just want to make sure you have all the steps. So it doesn't matter what level of developer you are. We're going to make a directory, initialize it. We need to install some dependencies. So the big one here is our Vonage server SDK, and make sure it's the beta. So if we look at our Messages API documentation, we do see that it's still currently in beta. And you can find more information about all these different channels and what are the functionalities. So if you want to spend some time looking at that and get a deeper dive of what the API is capable of. So make sure that you're installing that SDK beta version. We're going to also need Express, the .env package to handle our environment variables, and then got, because we're going to be doing an HTTP request to get that information from the Wolt API. We only have 2 files in this whole project, our index.js and our env file for environment variables. So now you'll need to go to your Vonage dashboard. If you don't have an account, create one. Get to the create an application page. And so you'll want to give your Vonage application a name. And then it's important that we do generate a public and private key. We'll be using this later on for our JWT authentication. For all of our APIs, we use JWTs to authenticate. So that'll automatically generate a file. You can then drag and drop or use your terminal to put that into your directory of your project. So now if you do ls, you should see we have our index.js, our private key, which was just generated, our node modules, and then hidden is that env file. So we're going to be running an ngrok server. What ngrok does is it mimics an external server because we can't actually authenticate over a local server. So ngrok basically allows us to create an external server while we're in development. and where that's going to be very handy in a second. When you scroll down on your create application page, you'll see that there's a bunch of, all of the different APIs have these capabilities that turn on and off with just this switch. So we're going to switch on for the messages API capabilities, and then it's going to ask us for a couple of URLs. First is the inbound. So that's going to handle any information that it gets from a user. And then the status. So that handles callbacks, depending on what this, like if the API was able to process a request. So first you're going to start your ngrok server, just ngrok HTTP 3000. You should see in your terminal something like this. These are your ngrok URLs, so those external facing URLs that are just alive while the ngrok server is alive. So we're going to use that. And you see that they point at our local host 3000. So once we start our node server, it'll be on port 3000, and then ngrok will look at that to then make that information available externally. So now in our Vonage dashboard, we're going to put that ngrok URL in each one of these places with the for the inbound /inbound, for the status URL /status. And then we just need to click generate new application, that black button. And now we'll have, and that's all we need to create a Vonage application. So now, first thing we need to do some setup. So we're going to set up our environment variable. So in that env file, we need to add 3 variables: API key, API secret, and API ID. You can get this. The first 2 is from the homepage of the Vonage dashboard. So if you just click on the Get Starting tab on the left, you'll see an API key. I've hidden mine. And you can just click that for copy. It'll copy it for you into your clipboard, and then you can paste that into your env file. Same for API secret. And then you need to go back, navigate back under the Your Applications tab, and you'll find that application that you just made. And there's an application ID, which you'll plug into app ID. So once we've set up, our application, we'll move into the Messages API tab on the left. So that'll take us to the Messages API sandbox. And if this is your first time doing it, this box will look like these. You'll need to click on Add to Sandbox for the Facebook Messenger to be added to your sandbox. And the Messages API sandbox uses a whitelist approach. So basically, because this is just a testing development, each user that will be able to interact with your chatbot needs to be added here manually. So you can send this QR code if you want to, show off to your friends, or the link, and then you'll have to put in this passphrase. It'll be different for you. You need to put it into the chat window that opens up. It'll open up a Facebook Messenger chat window. Add in this passphrase, and then you'll be added to the whitelist. And anyone that you add can also be added to the whitelist. If you scroll down from that little box, you'll also see another place for webhooks. So here we also need to add in that ngrok URL and hit save. So we've got all of the setup done. That was pretty fast and easy. Now we now we can jump into the code. So I've turned those steps that we had at the beginning into some pseudocode. We're going to first set up our Express app. Then we're going to connect to the Vonage API and send a first simple Facebook message over the sandbox. Then we'll call Wolt API and get the information for the restaurant. We're going to check if the restaurant is online. Then we will create some logic to send different messages to the user based on the restaurant status. And lastly, we're going to make sure that we loop over that logic so that our chatbot keeps running until the requested restaurant is back online. So this is our basic Express setup. As you can see at the beginning, we just require our .env package that gives us access to our environment variables. Then we require in our Vonage SDK. And then we require in the GOT library, which allows us to do HTTP request to the Wolt API. Very simple standard Express server setup, and we'll be listening again on server on port 3000. So we got our first step done. So the next step is to connect to the Vonage API and try and send out our first message. You can take this code from the Vonage documentation. Also, we have a really great blog, which Amanda is a frequent author on. And actually, I think I stole this bit of code from her. That's learn.vonage.com. That's our blog. So we have lots of examples of using the Messages API or any of the other APIs. But basically here, all we're going to do is we're going to initialize that Vonage object, pass it our environment variables, and just say that we are running this from the sandbox. And you see, yeah. And so the second part is to actually then make those requests to the sandbox. So here in our app, we're sending a post request to that inbound URL. We're going to expect a request and a response. Here, because the sandbox is providing our sender and our recipient, that just comes in as default. And here we can set what sort of content that we're going to send. So we can send text, we can send video, we can send rich data type content like pictures, emojis, all kinds of stuff, whatever you want. Again, in the documentation, it lists all the different types of content that you can send. And then we just do some error handling here. And again, connect to also make the request to the status URL just to make sure that we send the status and handle any errors. So one last step is we need to run our local server node and run that index.js. And if we open up our chatbot, we say, oi, we should see that message come back to us. Hola, bots Brazil. Great, so we've already done steps 1 and 2. Now we want to make that HTTP request to our external API in Wolt. So what we're gonna do is go to this API endpoint. This Wolt API has an endpoint that lists all the restaurants, and whether it's Wolt or Uber Eats or whatever your local favorite food delivery app, they almost all have an API that's publicly accessible with restaurant information and some sort of status if the restaurant is online or not. And so basically we just are getting that back, and then we're going to return the restaurant information here. So we've pulled that out into a separate function, but basically how that handles is just that this is still from our previous message example for using the Facebook Messenger. So right on that inbound, this is waiting for the user input. The user input is then going to come back as the request. So we go into the what we get back from the Vonage API, go into the body, go into the message. In the message, there's content. And inside the content, finally, we get the text. And we're going to clean it up a little bit to get that restaurant name that the user asked for. Then we'll pass that restaurant name into the getRestaurant function, which is back here. So that name then gets passed to the Wolt API. We get that back. And then we're going to handle that in our next step. So we got that going. So we've made our call to the Wolt API. And now we want to do a little bit of logic to check inside of that what that response from the API is if it's online. So when we get that response here, what we just talked about, what we're actually getting back is this big long JSON of results. And inside this JSON, we found that there is a attribute called online. And actually the way that we found this was just by prodding around on the Wolt website and seeing that there's this information comes back publicly, right? So we see that right now that this restaurant that we looked up is offline, so it's not accepting deliveries. So that will be basically just our Boolean, which will tell us whether whether we tell our user that the restaurant is delivering and we can quit out of our app, or if we need to keep checking every minute. Right, so we are going to create this logic. We're creating a function, which will basically, it'll take that restaurant object. It will check the online property, which we just saw. We will say, if it's online, we're going to tell our user, hey, it's now accepting orders. If it's not online, sorry, it's offline. We'll tell you when it's going to open again. So we can just now take that function, add it after the code we had before of the information we got back from the API, and put another check mark. So now we have 5 out of 6 of our steps done. And now the last thing is to add that bit of logic that will loop over and continue to run that check until the restaurant comes back that it's online. So we know that we want something like this, right? We want to do a while loop. While something, we're going to set an interval. It's going to run some sort of a loop, and we want it to check every 60 seconds, right? So in the loop, it's going to do basically the logic that we just did once a minute, and we need to do while something. So what I've done is that I've created a global variable. It's not the cleanest way of doing this, but it's fun. It's fine, and it works. So we're going to create a global variable, and it's going to have a status. And that status is basically going to be whether it's on or whether it's offline or not. By default, that restaurant is going to be, we're going to say that it's offline, because why would somebody come and use our bot if they know that that the restaurant is online? And then we're going to check. The counter is basically going to count how many times have we checked what the restaurant status is. And this is useful because the first time we check the restaurant, we want to tell the user that it's offline, right? But we don't want to tell the user that it's offline every time this loop runs, because then once every 60 seconds, they'll get a message that says, hey, we're sorry, the restaurant's still offline. We'll let you know when it's online again. And then 1 minute later, hey, we're sorry, the restaurant's offline. We'll tell you when it's online again. So basically, we just wanted to create a little count that tells us only the first time that it's offline that we check, do we want to tell the user. And then the name is just nice to store, that we can access the name of the restaurant that we're looking for globally, right? So we're going to create that global variable at the beginning of our code. And now, based on these new fields, we can update our send status message function, right? So we're still going to check if it's online. So what we're doing here is that we're going to set that status to false. And what that will do now is allow us to exit our loop, right? And if it's not online, right? So this is the online that we're getting back from the API. So if it's online, yes, we enter this conditional. So we're going to say if it's online, then it's not offline, right? And if it's online, we tell our user, hey, it's great, we're accepting orders, go order your favorite burger. If it's not online, that means that it is offline, right? And if it's offline, we need to check, is this the first time that we've realized that it's offline? If it's the first time, we want to tell our user, hey, this restaurant's offline. We'll tell you when the restaurant will be back online. Now, then we need to somehow update that, right? So afterwards, after that first time of hitting it and saying that message, then we're going to update, first of all, that the status is true, and that our count now becomes 1. So now the next time we'll skip this message, and we'll keep looping over and over, right? And now we can use that logic inside of our while loop. So now we have that global variable, and now it holds our status, right? That global status of what is the name of, what is the status of the delivery. So while the restaurant is offline is true, we're going to keep looping, and we'll do it once a minute. And lastly, what is that information that's in the loop? Well, it's the same information that we did before, pretty much, right? We're going to get that restaurant, and we already have the restaurant from earlier, right? So we can send that in. And you see that we use that global variable here to store that information, so we don't have to ask it from the user every time. So we send that to the getRestaurant function, and we get the status, and we just keep doing it as long as the loop keeps churning. So does it work? This is my demo from just before this workshop. So because this is a real API with real restaurants and everything, we won't see a restaurant go from offline to online, but we'll see what it looks like when it's offline, what it looks like when it's online. And it did work earlier. I was getting a lot of messages where restaurants, it was morning time here. So as the lunch rush began, I started getting a lot of messages on my Facebook Messenger saying, hey, the restaurant's now online. So let's see how that looks like. You're going to see in this video that first we go and I'm going to try and order from a restaurant that's offline. And then I'm going to try and order from a restaurant that's online. And in this video, we can actually see, because it's the real restaurants on a real API, we don't see the message update, right, that the restaurant is now online. But I can tell you earlier today, while I was testing out this chatbot, in the morning, all of the restaurants were offline. And then by lunchtime, I started getting a ton of notifications that these restaurants were now online. So the chatbot does in fact work. And it's really fun to see something that's so useful in my own life working. And I hope something that you can also try and play around with and make work for the next time that you're thinking about ordering lunch. So that's it for the demo. I just wanted to say thank you. Again, my name is Benjamin Aronov. I work at Vonage. You can find me on Twitter. You can find me on LinkedIn, Facebook, wherever you want to find me. I'm more than happy to reach out if any way I can help. And yeah, I'd be really interested to see if anyone wants to go on and make their own chatbots in Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp. And make sure you let us know about it. Thank you. Obrigado.